Now our jars have already been washed, so they're ready to go. We don't have to sterilize them because they're going to be in the canner for more than 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay? So, in checking our jars, we just want to make sure that I run my finger around the rim to make sure that they're free of any nicks or cracks or blemish that might cause the lid not to have a tight seal.
Okay.
So we're going to cut our carrots. So if you want to go ahead and take those and cut them in half or thirds, depending upon the size of the carrot itself.
Okay.
And the bubble one. These are all pieces of our equipment that we need to have ready.
Do I need to put the carrots in the jars in any special way?
Nope, they can just go in however you would like.
Okay.
Okay?
So how much water do I need to start with in that canner?
Follow your book's directions, but generally speaking, it's 3 to 4 inches of water in your canner
Okay.
to start with. We're just going to turn this on to a simmer so that I begin to heat the water that is up in here. And I didn't show it, but there's a rack that comes with all of the canners. Make sure that you use the rack that comes with it and you don't try and substitute some other item in the canner. That's so that the jars aren't sitting on the bottom of the canner. When it comes to a boil, you don't want the jars bouncing up and down.
Okay.
We're also going to add just a little bit of vinegar, about a tablespoon, into the water, and that just really helps to cut down with the mineral deposits that you will have both on the canner and in the jars if you're using water that might have minerals in it. Have you heard about people using salt as part of a method of preservation?
I've heard about people salting fish in ancient times.
And that works when I'm doing a drying process. But when we're doing canning, we don't have to add any salt to our product simply because it's for flavor only.
So if I was on a low salt diet, or if someone that I know is, I don't have to put the salt in.
Correct. It's just to your discretion, to your option.
So how far can I fill up these jars with the carrots?
You can fill them up to, we're going to have about a 1/2 inch headspace. So I want to make sure I've got ample room when I go to put in the water. I can brush them down a little bit.
Did the recipe tell me how much headspace I needed?
The recipe tells you how much headspace that you need. So we don't have to do any guessing. It says fill jars tightly, leaving 1 inch of headspace. And that's where this little tool comes in really handy. Each of these steps are a 1/2 inch, a 1/4 inch, sorry. And I can look at this and go, okay, I'm gonna put it at the end of my jar and be able to make sure that all of my food product and liquid is below that line. So we now have the carrots in the jars, and we are ready to be able to put the boiling water over top. We can either use a measuring cup or a ladle. Either will work, and I'll just turn this off and slide it over here a little closer to you.
Okay.
And we want to fill those jars. Do you remember what our headspace is?
You said 1 inch.
To 1 inch, correct. And we can pack them down in there a little bit. Most of the time I can judge 1 inch because it's at the neck of the jar. So when you get to the point that it starts to come up to the curve, that's about our 1 inch.
So I figure if I start with some water, I'm going to be able to move my carrots around and add more water.
If needed.
Yes.
Absolutely. It doesn't make any difference whether I'm using a regular jar which is what we're using today, or a wide mouth jar. Some people prefer the wide mouth just because they're a little easier to manipulate your product when you're placing it in there. But both would be processed at the same amount of time. So you're using the tool to be able to measure our headspace.
And I've got too much in this one. So do I take out liquid or do I take out those carrots on the top?
You can take out the carrots on the top to be able to make it work. There you go. Okay. Now the other thing that I might encourage before you actually measure the headspace is to run the bubble tool down the sides of the jars in 3 or 4 places to actually release any of the air bubbles that we may have down in there.
I see one there.
Because I want as much of the air out of the jar and only have the inch at the top that we're talking about for our headspace.
Oh, there we go. Got a couple of bubbles out of there.
Now while you're finishing there, I'll go ahead and place our flat lids on the jars. Okay, so now we're ready for the ring band. That's what this piece is called.
Okay.
It is reusable, so I don't have to purchase an extra amount of these. These lids I need to purchase and have new with every product that I can.
Okay.
So if you'll take one of the ring bands and start with a jar, and as I put it on there, I want to stop at the point of first resistance. So just where it first grabs, and then I want to turn it about 1 inch beyond. So in other words, it's fingertip tight, just what I can do, not with a grip, not with an extra tool, but just fingertip tight. The job of the ring band is just to hold the lid in place while it's in the canner until it can form that vacuum seal.
So I shouldn't wrench it down as tight as possible?
Absolutely not. Just fingertip tight. And then I can begin to place these in the canner. Like so. I've lost where you were.
Yeah, there.
I started with 3 or 4 inches of water in the canner. Follow your guidelines on the different canners. But I don't want water to come over the top of these jars like I do in a water bath canner. I just want enough in here to be able to create the steam to be able to raise the temperature and actually process. So I have my jars all in here. About one.
One right in the middle.
One in the middle. And then I'm ready to be able to put the lid on.
The water in here is not boiling yet, but I see steam coming off of it, so it's pretty hot.
Correct. Correct. And so if for some reason I don't have enough water in there, the water that you've had that we put over the carrots, just make sure it's hot. If I put cold water in, obviously it's going to take it longer to be able to come up to a boil.
So we put the lid on next?
Yes, we've got our carrots all in here around the canner. We've got a little bit of steam starting. I'm placing and lining up my indentation.
Twist.
This way.
Yeah, there we go.
And that way. Okay,
right.
now do you remember how we put the...
You said opposite sides.
Opposite sides. So, down and turn. This way and turn.
Because I can assume that if you put it all around, you would end up with one side really down and one side that would be
That's the risk you run.
really high.
Okay. So, according to our recipe, we're going to process our carrots at 10 pounds pressure.
Okay.
Okay? So,
Can I put the pressure thing on now?
we don't want to put our pressure weight on there at this point because we're going to let our water come to a boil so we can turn it up as high as it'll go here. And our goal is to be able to drive all of the air that's inside this canner out.
Okay.
so that I can achieve that 240 degrees. And in order to drive that air out, it's going to come out of this vent pipe. So we're going to let the water boil until I can see a steady stream of steam for 10 minutes. Okay, so you see that we've got a stream of steam coming out of our vent pipe.
Okay, so
Okay.
now we have to set the timer?
Now we need to set the timer for 10 minutes to be able to get the air that's inside this canner out before we start to build pressure.
Okay. It's been 10 minutes, and so you said we're going to process at 10 pounds pressure,
At
right?
10 pounds pressure, so we can put the number 10 on the vent pipe,
Okay.
okay?
I have a hot pad to do this, just so we don't burn my hands. And now it should start to
It's going to
build
start
pressure.
to build the pressure on the inside of the canner, and when it reaches pressure, this will begin to jiggle, and that's when we'll set our timer to begin the processing time in our recipe.
And we process our carrots for how long?
We're going to process our carrots for 25 minutes because we're doing pints.
So our time's up. Can we take the jars out now?
Well, it's not quite ready. See how when the jiggler goes off, that's how we're keeping a constant pressure on the inside. So my gauge says about 10 pounds pressure, and this I just want to jiggle every once in a while. So we've been able to adjust the temperature. That's how you're going to judge how to keep it at that even temperature throughout our processing.
Can I at least turn the heat off now?
Now we're done with our processing. Absolutely. We can turn the heat off,
Okay.
and then we're going to let it cool naturally. We don't want to take the weight off, or we will cause a vacuum on the inside and it will suck all of the liquid out of the jars. The same thing with trying to hurry the process up. So if you have an electric range, I can move the pot over to be able to let it cool a little faster. With gas, I just turn it off and we're just going to sit and let it wait.
Now, I happen to live on a hill. Does that mean I need to do anything extra? Does it matter where you live with the pressure?
Really good point that I didn't talk about at the beginning. So in your recipe, you're going to find that it's going to give you altitude choices. So you have to know what your altitude is above sea level and then follow the guidelines. So if you're under 2,000 feet, which most of Ohio would probably qualify, then I can just go ahead and process according to these directions. If it's higher than that, then I need to add additional pressure in the recipe.
Okay. So we have to wait for this to drop down to 0 pressure, and then can I take the lid off?
And then we're going to remove the weight and let it sit for another 10 minutes before I take the jars out.
And how long do you think it's going to take for this canner to get down to 0 pressure?
Every canner is different depending upon the weight and the product that is on the inside. I would guess 30 to 60 minutes.
Take the lid off?
Now we can take the lid off, yes, and I'm going to lift it away from us because it's going to be very, very warm. Did you hear it?
I did. I heard that first pop.
Yes.
So I can take the jars out now?
You can take the jars out. Just be careful to keep them as level as possible.
Oh,
There's
and
another one.
they're still boiling inside.
It's very, very hot in there. Remember, at 10 pounds pressure, we're at 240 degrees.
That was a good pop.
We don't need to worry about tightening any of the lids. We don't need to worry about removing that water. At this point, we just want to keep them nice and straight and setting them on a surface that is padded. So a towel, a cutting board, anything like that will work. Our jar lifter is essential at this point because of the heat of the jars. Can you see them still boiling?
That one's really going to town, boiling.
Yeah.
Now that they're out, we just let them cool down.
We let them set undisturbed for 12 to 24 hours. And at that point, then I can wipe the jars off, remove the ring bands, make sure I label them, put the date so that I know how to rotate if I am canning several different loads. And I have them ready to be able to enjoy with my family. As we close, something that I didn't talk about at the very beginning, if this is your first time in working with a pressure canner, I strongly encourage you to take it home, work with it on your range, just put 4 or 5 inches of water in the bottom of it so you know how your canner is going to react on your range long before I've got my carrots or beans or meat or whatever I happen to be canning ready. I can go through the process and kind of know what to expect.
Or I could work with someone who knows what they're doing like you.
Absolutely. It's always more fun with 2 or more.